I'll ask Frank Klose from 97.3 ESPN.com, who answers your Phillies mailbag questions as he joins us on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Any other Philly, Frank? Was any other Philly deserving, or Real Muto, should he be the only guy?
Well, I kind of thought Hector Neris had a shot, but unfortunately he kind of fell off his rails a little bit with those couple of bone saves towards the end. Otherwise, he might have gotten some real consideration for the All-Star team.
Yeah. Kingery, I guess, what do you think? Just didn't have enough games?
Yeah, I would not have been shocked if he got the nod, if he didn't have somebody like JT Realmuto, who is, of course, widely respected by the players across the league. If Realmuto wasn't able to make it, I wouldn't be shocked if they'd take somebody like Kingery, or even if they selected somebody who got injured from the Phillies and they wanted to, throw the Phillies a bone and put a player on. I wouldn't be shocked if somebody like Kingery got on that way, but his day will come.
Yeah, Frank, and let's dive into a couple things before we get into your mailbag here, which you can, of course, read at 973ESPN.com. Jake Arrieta, Bones, Spurs, and what's really the options here? I mean, it seems to me, my read is they don't have any other options, so they're hoping he pushes through this thing, which it kind of tells you how limited they are with their options right now.
Yeah, I saw Jason Stark of The Athletic. He said that the Phillies are probably going to add a pitcher. He seemed confident that the Phillies would. That was even before we knew about Arrieta. So I guess it depends who they're talking to now at this point, what real options exist out there, and if there's any way that the Phillies can sort of move those discussions along, because, let's face it, right now the Phillies are really hurting in that starting rotation and need help badly.
Yeah, they need help badly, and I think it's an indication that they can't get any help, Frank, by using – do you agree with that, that the fact that they don't think they can get a better option, that they want him to keep – I mean, he's pitched through this before when he was with the Orioles, and it seems to me that the Phillies are just hopeful that he pitches because they realize they don't have any better options.
Yeah, they seem to give the All-Star break as some time that he can sort of test it out, rest it out a little bit, and then see what happens. At least with the All-Star break, they have some time. Coming out after the break, they can use 4 starters before they have to worry about a 5th starter. So they have a little bit of time. I think they would love it to be a non-issue. But because they have that time after the break with the rotation rested, they don't need to immediately decide. So I think they're worried. They're hoping for the best, but they don't have to do anything before the end of the break, but they've got to do something soon.
All right, some questions from our listeners in the mailbag. At Frank Klose on Twitter, Shane wants to know, why not Davey Grullon? He's hitting over 300. He's a backup as a backup catcher. Knapp's been struggling. He is a International League All-Star. Could we see the Phillies add Grullon as maybe a little more, a little bit more pop, a little punch later on in the second half of the season?
Well, I think it's pretty certain that you're going to see Davey Grullon come September. That's one thing I think is going to be the case, because most major league teams add a third catcher as you get to September, given the large physical demands of the position. Now, I think, though, for what Shane is going for is he's speaking to Andrew Knapp, not necessarily being the offensive force that you might like. The thing about Knapp is he's had to come up in a lot of tough situations where he's facing a closer in the late innings because he's the last bat off the bench. And that's where people are getting a little frustrated with Knapp. But when you look at the greater picture with Grullon, the issue with him is, if you bring him to the major leagues, will he play? Now, if you look at the innings caught by catchers in the major leagues, JT Realmuto has caught more innings than any other catcher. JT Realmuto has started more games than any other catcher. So literally the backup catcher on the Phillies is going to play less than any other catcher that's a backup catcher in Major League Baseball. So then the question becomes, do you want Grullon to come up and sit? And I think that answer is no for a couple reasons. One is, are the Phillies going to extend JT Realmuto? I think they plan to try. And so if he is your long-term solution, then Grullon sort of becomes expendable in a trade as a trade candidate. Do you want to kill his trade value by letting him sit on the bench in the major leagues? And additionally, if he might end up being your long-term option because the Phillies decide not to move past Real Muto, then this season is when he needs to be getting his AAA at-bats because he has not had many at-bats just yet at AAA. And so the Phillies will want to make sure he does get that opportunity there because, he's only started 55 games in AAA at this point. And if Phillies brought him up now, they might be stunting his development just a little bit.
Yeah.
And finally, the other reason why you don't call up Grullon is he has a broken toe and he's on the injured list.
Oh, that would be a big reason.
Yeah.
Unable to play at this current stage. All right, let's go to Vance's question. He says, in your opinion, Frank, is the bullpen okay to compete? Instead of another reliever, do the Phillies acquire 2 starters at the deadline? I think that's a good question because the bullpen has a lot of guys who are slowly coming back, so they can kind of rebuild that bullpen in-house. But I like his question is, should they just let the bullpen kind of fall into place and focus on the starters?
Well, when you look at the bullpen there are 8 names that have spent time on the injured list at one time or another. Of course, David Robertson, who was the big addition, Tommy Hunter, who they just got back, Pat Neshek, Adam Morgan, Anthony Dominguez, Edubray Ramos, Juan Nicasio, Victor Arano. That in itself is a contender's bullpen that has all been on the injured list, and most of them, if you look at the current group of guys, you have Hector Neris who's pitching well as your closer. So far, so good for Tommy Hunter. And your 2 lefties have been pretty reliable in Adam Morgan and Jose Alvarez. So 4 solid work. Now, the thing that's happening with the Phillies is these starters are not giving them innings, and then you have to go to the other half of this bullpen. I think very highly of J.D. Hammer. I think very highly of Edgar Garcia. The problem with both of those pitchers is they are rushed to the major league. They did not get the full development that they were tapped to have because even the Phillies' depth got hurt. So these guys are rushed to the major leagues. We can see when they come in, especially now because they're coming in higher leverage situations,
right,
that they don't necessarily have the seasoning. So then the other 2 guys, Ranger Suarez is a 3-year-long man, and then you have the spot that's currently held by Axel Rios, which seems to be the merry-go-round spot. So if you ask me, you get some starters in there, 2 starters that can pitch you deep into the games. Then you can move Velasquez, you can move Pivetta to the bullpen. Then all of a sudden you're feeling a lot better about it. So I think the focus is starters first. That's not to say that if somebody is offering a nice reliever in trade that they won't take that player if the deal is good. But I think.
It seems we lost connection with Frank. His phone seems to be going in and out there, but we got another question we want to get to in the mailbag. We'll see if we can pop him back on because the last question is a good one, but I do want to ask him one follow-up question when you're talking about the bullpen and the starters. And it's been a big topic of conversation, and we'll bring Frank Klose back into the conversation in just a second here. And, of course, you can follow Frank on Twitter at Frank Klose for your mailbag questions. Every week you send him a question on Twitter, and he'll answer that in the mailbag. And then you can read his full response to your questions at 973ESPN.com. It's one of our more popular segments on the website there. You go to the website and check out the questions. It usually takes 3 questions each week, and we talk a little baseball here on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. Now, the question yesterday, we talked about this a little bit, and I want to get Frank's opinion on this, a guy who's around the team a lot, spring training, goes to all the home games, is, one, a lot of people think the pitching just stinks. So my question is it that the pitching just stinks, the starting pitcher just isn't any good, the bullpen just not any good, or is it that Kapler doesn't do a good job managing the pitching staff? In other words, could these guys be better if they were managed better? And I'm interested to get Frank's take on that. So we'll bring Frank Klose back into the conversation here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. And then we got one more mailbag question that we want to pop your way and get Frank's take on it. So let's bring Frank back in. I'll go to that question, Frank. So we're talking starters, bullpen, the pitching. You just kind of outlined what was wrong with the pitching a little bit. But my question for you is, and I asked it to Scott Lauber yesterday, is it that the pitching's not very good, or does Kapler not do a good job managing the pitching?
You know, I have a hard time faulting Kapler with a lot of this because he doesn't have a lot to work with right now.
Okay, so it's fair to say that it's not – well, a lot of people are critical of him because they think he does a bad job. You know, he leaves guys in too short, then he pulls them too, quickly. He goes to the bullpen. Some of the guys are burned out. They can't pitch in, the one game. 3 of his best arms were not available. Some people don't think he manages his bullpen very well.
There have been times where I thought I would have chosen a different path forward, but like the last time Nick Pivetta pitched, he leaves him in. He ends up giving up that big home run, and the game gets out of control. If the Phillies had pulled Pivetta then and gone to the bullpen, what does he really have? So I feel like he's in a thankless position right now, and until the front office really fix the situation, I think it's really hard to be too critical of Kapler here with this bullpen use.
All right, let's get to the final mailbag question of the day here. It comes from Mike, and he wants to know, is Scott Kingery okay in center field, or do the Phillies still need to go out and get a guy?
Well, I think if you had to compare third base and center field, I would certainly pick center field for Scott Kingery between the two positions. I think we've seen in the last week or two that when Maikel Franco is at third base, they're a substantially better team defensively. And so if Scott Kingery is going to play every day with everybody else where they are, I would rather see him in center field. However, I would not be opposed to the Phillies acquiring somebody who's a very strong center fielder, acquiring a strong third baseman, and letting him kind of fall back into the position where he's bouncing around a little bit, perhaps even squeezing Cesar Hernandez a little bit. Scott Kingery is going to take over second base at the end of the season when Cesar Hernandez leaves as a free agent. So I don't think it's the end of the world if he starts playing some in front of Cesar Hernandez, especially if they get some good pieces to play in center and third base. But I think the important thing here is that you just make sure that you get Scott Kingery in that lineup every day the way he's hitting. And, long term, he doesn't have a place in center field. So if you can play him some at second base ahead of Hernandez because you've got 2 other really good players, I don't have a problem with that. But, Adam Haseley or Mickey Moniak are your long-term center fielders. One of them may be traded soon. One of them may still be with the team and become the center fielder next year. So it's not his long-term place, but he's more than fine if you ask me for right now. But just get his stats in the lineup however you can this season. And then next season you give him second base.
He's gotten better out there, I'll tell you that much. He definitely tracks better. He gets better breaks on the ball. He looks more comfortable out there playing center field. Scott Kingery does. Frank Klose at Frank Klose on Twitter. Give him a follow there for all the Phillies as the second half of the season gets back underway Thursday. And then, of course, tonight JT Realmuto represents the Phillies at the Major League Baseball All-Star Game. Frank, appreciate it as always, pal.
Thanks, Mike.